Let's return now, though, to local matters and continuing on with our analysis of the budget. Joining us live from Canberra is the ACTU President Michelle O'Neil. Appreciate your time. Jobs are central to this budget. Treasury forecasting the unemployment rate will fall to 5% by June next year to 4.75% by mid-2023. Rebuilding the jobs market after the pandemic is an admirable feat, no doubt one you support, something central to your advocacy as well.
It is really important to try and get more people into jobs, but what the Treasurer didn't talk about is the other half of the story, which is the problem with the sort of jobs that have been created. We saw the biggest rise in casualisation ever in 2020. More Australian workers having to do 2, 3 or 4 jobs just to get by. And Josh Frydenberg didn't talk last night about the underemployment figures. So there's 2 big issues that are missing out of the budget: addressing insecure work, reliable jobs, and the fact that we've got a wages crisis. And this budget predicts that there's going to be no increase in wages over the next 4 years.
And so you're laying the groundwork there for the opposition's budget reply. You're expecting Labor will have significant new policies targeting wages growth in particular. I mean, what is on your wish list?
Well, the issues that matter to working people are the issues about the reliability and security of their jobs. And what I mean by that is that if we're going to have a fair and inclusive recovery, you've got to make sure that people have money in their pockets to spend and the certainty or the confidence that they're going to have jobs in the future so that they do spend that money. This is the things that really will make a difference. And that means when you give money to business, when you have a spending budget, and we think it is the time to spend, it's got to have strings attached. And again, we see billions of dollars going in tax write-off to business or support for business in this budget, but without the conditions that say some of that has to be tied to securing long-term jobs where people can rely on them, know how much they're going to earn and make sure they get wage increases. We've seen the biggest change in what the share that workers get of the economy compared to business over the last number of years. Profits went up last year, record levels, and the share that workers get has never been lower.
Is that unfair, though, to focus on the business investment spending? I mean, as we know, strong businesses usually equal job growth. Plenty there for skills, through apprenticeship programs. There's infrastructure spending, tax relief for low and middle income families, not to mention the huge injections in aged care, mental health, childcare, family and domestic violence. I mean, there are a lot of winners in this budget.
There are improvements in those areas, but you have to look at whether they're going to be lasting improvements, whether there's going to be a legacy for people when we're spending this money. And we support the spending, but we want to see the benefits that last for the future as well. And taking your examples of aged care, we've got money that is going into aged care. Aged care is in crisis. But what we know and what the Royal Commission told us is that if you don't address the workforce issues, then you're not going to improve the quality of care and the needs of older Australians. And the budget fails to do that. It doesn't say anything about the need to make sure that workers in aged care have more secure jobs, that they're paid better and that they get the training and support they need, and that there's enough of them to make sure that we have the quality of care that is really essential. Quality jobs equal quality care. So this is what we mean about conditions. Accountability for government spending, for taxpayers spending, that shows that we're going to get a result that is a fairer result, rather than just ending up lining the pockets of some of those very well-off owners of private aged care facilities.
Michelle, you are, I know, part of a coalition of high-profile women from across the spectrum, from unions like yours, other advocacy groups, business leaders, all calling for a so-called women-friendly budget. We saw that Women's Economic Security Statement running more than 80 pages, boasting $3 billion or so worth of commitments. We saw that $1 billion for women's safety programs, $1.7 billion for childcare. Did the government hit the mark on that front? I mean, we can debate the motivations for doing all of that, but can you give the government a pat on the back on the women-friendly aspect of this budget?
Well, I definitely acknowledge the government's learned how to say the word women and has looked at some of the key issues, but what I will say is that many of those measures are piecemeal and delayed. And some of the key things that will make a difference for women's economic security and safety requires structural change, and the government missed the opportunity to do that. So it is welcome to have things like the removal of the $450 threshold on earning super, which really affected women more than anyone else, because women are more likely to be earning low wages and in jobs where they don't earn that much. So that's a welcome change. But if you look at the other changes, there is nothing that's going to deliver that gender equity at the core of our labour market and economy. And things like linking the early childhood education and care to workers in the sector, lifting their skills and lifting their pay and conditions, and doing something about the fact we can't retain and find enough workers to work as early childhood educators is missing. It was an opportunity for the government to actually do something that they tantalisingly did briefly last year, which was introduce free universal childcare. Universal quality childcare would actually add to the economy. If we had the same participation rate of women between 25 and 45 years old as men, it would put $70 billion into our GDP, $30 billion into household incomes. But instead, the government makes a small, not very courageous step that will improve it for people that have got a couple of kids at the same time in childcare, but nothing for people who only have one child. And of course, all of it is delayed until after the next budget. Sorry, after the next election.
Yeah, so not exactly a big tick from you on that front either. Michelle O'Neil, the ACTU President, appreciate you joining us with your reaction.
Thanks very much, Ashley.